Thank you, Vamsi. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening to everybody who's joining us online. Now, over the next 15 minutes, what I would do is walk you through at what we at Zinnov believe is the future of work, where enterprises need to invest, and how they need to stay relevant for the next decade. At the start of this year, we thought, with economies opening up, we said we will go back to 2019. But unfortunately, it's an interconnected world, and technology is not immune to what is happening around us. What I would want to do is start off with 4 key transitions that will define 2022 and also have a profound impact on 2023 and beyond. Some of these have had roots in the pandemic, and some of them are yet to play out fully. If you look at the first transition, is sustainability. The pandemic gave us a glimpse of what clean air and good environment looks like, right? Coming from India, it was good to see lesser cars on the road and good blue skies after a while. Sustainability is not a new concept, but it is going to be an important concept for both governments and companies going forward. If you look at USA, Europe, and India recently have put on a strong foundation for the 2030 roadmap. However, there are countries like Costa Rica, which currently have generating 98% of their electricity from renewable energy. And this they have been doing for the last 5 years. For companies, sustainability is a way of reimagining their business model. If you look at Amazon, they have invested close to $2 billion in terms of going net neutral by 2040. Audi today believes that by 2025, around 40% of the overall sales will be electric vehicles. If you look at what Airbus is doing, Airbus has started building hydrogen-powered airplanes. They will be in manufacturing by 2035. So going forward, we'll see a lot more focus, a lot more investments by governments and companies to drive the sustainable mandate. The second important transition is semiconductors. 10 years back, Mark Anderson said that software is eating the world. While that may remain true, we can say the same thing about semiconductor right now. If you look at all the verticals, be it large technology companies like Microsoft, Amazon, or Apple, be it an automotive company like BMW, or be it an industrial company like ABB, almost everybody has their own individual semiconductor strategies going ahead. This is to reduce dependency. This is to ensure that they are not failing in their business goals because of the supply chain constraints that happened last year. Almost all new technologies, AI, 5G, machine learning, IoT, and even connected cars, everything depends on semiconductors. This makes it very important for governments as well as companies to ensure that they reduce dependency in this area. The investment made by Intel in Ohio of $20 billion is just a start. Going forward, we'll see a lot more companies and setting up manufacturing hubs globally, obviously in line with government policies. The third and the most recent transition is increase in defense spending. To be fair, 3 weeks back, none of us knew that what would happen at a global level, and none of us thought that we'll be in a global confrontation stage. Today, we are in a situation we don't know what is going to happen. One thing which is very clear is that governments will start increasing their spend on defense. You've seen that with Germany. They have reversed their 10-year-old rule of not spending on defense, and they have committed 100 billion euros on their army. This is what will follow with almost all the rest of the countries in Europe and across the world. Now, what is happening is this will be a direct impact on defense manufacturers and engineering companies, right? You have seen in the last 3 weeks, companies in this area across Europe and US increase in their stock prices by around 30%. The final transition, and which is connected to all the above 3 transitions, and this is something which we have seen play over the pandemic, is acceleration to digital, right? This is going to continue. What we are seeing right now, when the pandemic started, companies invested in remote work, companies invested in AI, companies invested in automation. Now the same companies are investing in technologies to ensure that the workforce comes back to work. Right? You will see a lot more investments at scale in smart buildings, in office spaces to ensure that people are provided with a safe and secure working environment. On the same hand, there's an interesting observation. A lot of traditional companies invested and accelerated the digital transformation during the pandemic. What we are seeing is most of them are struggling to keep pace with the digital natives. What is going to happen is all of these companies are starting to rely more on service providers, at the same time starting to build more on platforms such as Microsoft and Amazon to stay invested and drive the digital transformation. So what does this mean? What we are seeing is almost all of these transitions are playing out simultaneously. This has never happened. And this is a great opportunity and presents a great opportunity for engineering and technology services. If you just look at digital engineering, it has grown tremendously over the last year, and it continues to grow and will be the growth lever for the engineering services space. For us, digital engineering is usage of new technologies such as 5G, AI, robotics, etc. in building or creating new products and services or enhancing your existing products and services. We believe this area is set for growth. We see this entire market growing by 20%. Overall, if you look at the market size, it is going to be around 2.3 trillion by 2026. And then there is another part of where is the geographical view of where the large spenders are. And if you look closely at these numbers, and these are numbers which are updated every year, over the last 7 to 8 years, what we saw was there was an equal distribution between North America versus Europe plus APAC. Going forward, what we will see is the spending by North America is going to increase rapidly, primarily because there is the internet companies and the software companies which are going to drive this spend. The spend in Europe is going to come in from companies from automotive, aerospace, and industrial. When it comes to Asia Pacific, it's an interesting observation. China is the bellwether over there. But going forward, what we believe is the growth is going to come in from the Japanese companies. These are the companies which are going to invest more on the engineering and R&D portion. We've also started to see a lot of substantial investments by service industries. This is very interesting because earlier, most of these industries did not focus on this area. What is starting to happen is traditional verticals such as banking and financial services and retail are being disrupted heavily by the digital native companies. If you look at Amazon, which is a clear-cut digital disruptor in the retail, but when it comes to even banking and financial services, you have traditional players being disrupted by companies such as Robinhood and other startups. Today, if you talk to a Walmart or a Goldman Sachs, their engineering teams, internal engineering teams, look a lot more similar in fashion to what the engineering teams at a Google or a Facebook would look like. So we'll see these investments going on by traditional companies across their engineering teams going forward, especially in the service industry space. Now, all of these investments, all of these transformations are heavily dependent on talent and human capital, right? And almost everybody in this room would have got this question over the last 2 years as to how do we address the talent shortage, from where do we get the talent. Let me share some perspectives on this. Traditionally, if you look at talent migration, the talent pools consisted in the emerging economies, and it moved to the advanced economies. The advantage that advanced economies had was they were able to absorb the talent and fulfill their demand. Over the years, this has created a very unequal distribution of talent and supply gap. And at the same time, there is an imbalance that has been there in the system for a long time. This is pre-pandemic. What we see going forward is there are certain areas that this is going to be exacerbated. And if you look at the current numbers, we believe it will be close to an 8 million number that we're looking at in terms of talent shortage by 2026. When COVID happened, when the pandemic came in, right, there was a biggest disruption on the immigration side. Countries went into lockdown, people could not travel, the talent supply gap itself expanded. At the same time, the initial months of COVID, there was a lot of anxiety. And this led way to a lot of opportunities for the talent workforce and finally resulted in something which we know as the Great Resignation in 2021. Around 70 million American labor force quit their jobs for better pay and benefits. Companies across the board scrambled to understand what they need to do and looked at alternative measures to counter the so-called talent inflation. Now, if you look at a company like Amazon, what they did is their base pay doubled to $350,000 so that they could attract the right talent and hire the right talent. And at the same time, you will see a lot more of such companies focusing more on pay so that they are able to attract the right talent going forward. The Ukraine and Russia war has further worsened the gap, right? If you look at companies are moving out of Russia, companies are trying to offshore from Ukraine, mind you, but this will take months together to stabilize the operations. Ukraine being a very key delivery location for both IT and engineering services, it raises deep concerns for companies which are operating out of these locations. At the same time, a lot of companies are dependent on these locations for their activities. At the same time, when we spoke to a lot of companies who are thinking of expanding in Europe, the current status is all of them are holding off their investments. They're looking at multiple avenues in APAC and in LATAM to expand. Obviously, India and LATAM market will be the biggest beneficiaries of this, but this is where companies are looking at. Now, all of these is leading to uncertainty, right? Enterprises are trying to understand how should they look at work, what should be the future of work, right? And as enterprises look to adopt to these uncertainties and define the future of work, we have looked at several factors to help build a comprehensive playbook. This consists of 7 factors, and I'll walk through each of them over the coming 5 minutes. What we believe the future of playbook or future of work playbook should look like is that where companies need to leverage automation as much as possible. Going forward, a clear demarcation between human intervention and machine intervention will define the future of work for many companies going ahead. We will see automation play an important role in terms of how companies are looking at talent, how companies are looking at sourcing talent, and at the same time, how companies are looking at commissioning talent across various functions. The second important part is look at talent hotspots. Ensure your talent pool is truly global, right? In the current scenario, there are multiple business continuity plans that are helping you deliver, that are helping you, adjust to the crisis caused by the pandemic and the geopolitical tensions. But going forward, there has to be a clear approach in terms of how do you look at talent, how do you look at talent pools, and at the same time look at locations wherein you can scale and grow teams for end-to-end product ownership. The third and the important point which I want to talk about is companies need to start getting comfortable with the gig economy concept. They need to start embracing contractors and contingent workforce, because this is where they'll attract millennials, they'll attract Gen Zs and other digital native talents. If you look at some of the largest internet companies, their contingent workforce is bigger currently than their internal workforce. You have companies in the retail domain which have leveraged gig economy platforms to service their customers. So going forward, gig economy will be a big thing, and HR teams need to be need to adjust themselves to this new phenomena. The fourth and important part is to transition seamlessly across the work modes. Now, every company will need to think of roles, responsibilities, bases, geographies, and how do they fit into each of these 4 modules, right? How do they look at a remote independent contractor? How do they look at a hybrid remote workforce? How do I look at a moonlight remote workforce, wherein some of these employees will have separate gigs to ensure that they're getting money from outside sources as well? And how do they look at their full-time remote workforce? So when companies start thinking about locations, about roles and responsibilities, they need to understand how they would need to fit it across these 4 parameters. Finally, companies also need to leverage partners very, very closely, right? This is something which will define a lot of work that they do in-house versus they do with partners, right? A good leverage of partners will help them with their product development and also other activities. Classic examples are Google and Accenture. You have companies which have worked closely with service providers to tap into the talent pool and capabilities so that they can bring their products faster to the market. How do you tap into universities? How do you tap into universities to train people to tap into talent? How do you tap into startups to ensure that you are driving the right innovation modules? Companies need to think about these. The next point is how companies are looking at innovation, right? This is a very important point. Innovation is going to be something which every company and any company will have to invest on in the future. How are you looking at creating global innovation hubs? How are you looking at creating areas wherein you need investment so that these can be your blockbuster products for the future? How are you looking at collaborating and driving an innovation culture within the company? How you are promoting an innovation culture, right? So these are all aspects that companies will have to go forward when they look at the future of work. Finally, the last point which we think everybody should be looking at is how do I reskill my existing workforce? There is a study which says by 2025, around 40% of the core skills which we are performing today will need to be reskilled. This is across verticals, across companies. How are we looking at this? How are we trying to solve this problem? There are companies which have already started looking at this. There is a very good program set aside by Shell in helping companies look at artificial intelligence, helping their employees look at artificial intelligence. Amazon has committed close to $700 million to ensure that they are reskilling their employees by 2025 so that they are able to perform in the digital workplace. We need to think through all these 7 factors. We have leaders in this room who are in a position to take decisions on each of these areas. Finally, I'd like to conclude by saying that in this time of uncertainty, companies which are focusing on employees and capability and talent well-being will be the ones which will define the future of work. That is all I have. Thank you.